DOJ's $1.8 billion slush fund deal with Donald Trump bans the IRS from pursuing claims it may have made against him forever.
I was trying to think of a technical term for this. It's like criminal financial masturbation, right? So what you're looking at is this right here, okay? Right?
Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining me today, because this is one discussion you do not want to miss. A heated panel debate completely exploded when Cornell West and former intelligence analyst Peter clashed with conservative commentator Scott over a controversial $1.8 billion government fund that critics are calling one of the largest examples of presidential self-dealing ever. Scott did everything he could to defend the situation, but what followed was a relentless and jaw-dropping takedown that left the entire panel stunned. The debate only gets more intense as it goes on, and trust me, the ending is something you have to see for yourself. Before we dive in, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, and share this video to support the channel. Also, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. I love seeing viewers from around the world and connecting with this amazing community. Now, let's jump right into it.
Always a blessing. But I just want to hear my dear brother Scott try to rationalize this in some way, and I see you're getting checkmated here, because there's just no grounds for justification of this unless you open the gates and you got trillions of dollars for ex-slaves and ex-Jim Crow people. You got 6,000 of the Innocence Project just at Harvard Law School of people who've been incarcerated, and you got 2.2 of mass incarceration. I've been blessed to teach in prison for 49 years. Now tomorrow is Malcolm X's birthday. He's 101. What is it about Malcolm? Well, what we're talking about is this is just the peak of an iceberg. When you're living in an empire that is unraveling because the hatred and the greed is overwhelming. And so there's no sincerity, there's no integrity, there's no character. So people will justify anything in the name of power and might as opposed to integrity and what is right. That's a spiritual crisis. That's a moral crisis. Malcolm X was right about that. I was glad to see his face on that magnificent banner down there in Alabama when they marched in Selma and Montgomery. Martin was there, Fannie Lou Hamer was there, but it's not a question of skin pigmentation. It's a question of character, integrity, and the attempt to do what is right. There's no integrity in justifying $1.8 billion of people who engaged in criminal activity actually killed some policemen, and they get compensated, they get reparations, and black folk, indigenous folk, other folk, unfair, even white brothers and sisters who have gone to jail innocent, who deserve some kind of accountability. There's no way you can justify this. But this is just one peak of an iceberg. What we're seeing is spiritual sickness, moral decrepitude, and political corruption on steroids. But the good news is you still got folk in the country who are trying to exemplify some integrity and character and courage.
Peter, is there, and to you also, Sabrina, is there a way to fight this? Because there has to be someone who's injured by this, right? So the public, the general public, who can say, hey, these are my tax dollars, they're not really considered
Oh, if
victims
only
of
the
this.
taxpayers had a claim against frivolous spending by the government. That would be a wonderful thing to have. No, I mean, the Trump administration is going about this all wrong. The way you're supposed to do is you're supposed to have folks set up a nonprofit, and then you either have a company do the third-party payments into the federal government for leniency, or you just allocate tax dollars from like the Inflation Reduction Act, and that goes to your political allies. That's how you button it up, you make it legal, and you avoid all of this. But to your point, like on the historic discrimination, I mean, there was $2 billion in the Inflation Reduction Act that was allocated for black farmers in the South who had been historically discriminated against by the USDA. Like, there have been tons of programs that have done this. I think there's a very legitimate claim, and let's be very clear, I agree with Scott. We're not talking about, and if they are, I condemn it, money going to folks who violently assaulted police officers. I know folks who were at January 6th, broke no laws except they were on the side of an invisible line, did not enter any building, were not violent, you know, whose lives were upended and ruined, where other folks who were maybe not at the same political persuasion, who had committed, you know, similar minor offenses, weren't even charged or didn't even have those charges brought up. So I think it's important that there is parity, and if there was an overcorrection or an exertion in one direction, that tilt back towards the Senate.
Can I just say that we're talking about nearly $1.8 billion to the same president that said the U.S. government can't afford to pay for Medicare, Medicaid, child care, or daycare. So I think there are a lot of, and now you have on top of that the gas crisis where people are paying, over $1.50 than they were before the war started. So I think when you look at this giant slush fund of money, I think people are going to look at that and say, well, what about me? What can the government do for me? And this is not going to benefit people. So I think
when did he say we can't afford Medicare or Medicaid?
He said they've cut it, and he also
for non-citizens. We can't afford it for non-Americans. We can't afford it for non-Americans.
We cannot afford Medicare and Medicaid, and that should be pushed to the states to pay for, and that the federal government could further subsidize. But he did also say that the federal government cannot afford daycare and childcare for millions of families all around the country.
This is what happens when someone with genuine intellectual firepower steps into a debate and refuses to let talking points carry the day. The moment Cornell West told Scott he was being checkmated, you could feel the energy in the room shift. Everyone knew the conversation had reached a turning point. What made that moment so powerful is that Cornell was not simply saying, "You're wrong." He challenged the very foundation of the argument. His point was simple. If you're going to support compensation for people who were treated unfairly, then you have to be willing to apply that standard consistently. That means addressing the suffering of former slaves, victims of Jim Crow, the thousands of cases connected to the Innocence Project, and the millions currently caught up in mass incarceration. That is the question his opponents struggle to answer. Then Cornell took it even further. He argued that there is no moral consistency in supporting $1.8 billion for individuals who committed crimes and harmed law enforcement, while people who endured generations of discrimination or spent years in prison for crimes they did not commit receive nothing. Whether you agree or disagree, it was a challenge that landed hard. Peter followed up with another key point. He argued that if the administration wanted to pursue this, there were established legal avenues available through nonprofits, third-party organizations, or legislation passed by Congress. Instead, he claimed the process bypassed those channels and relied on executive authority, and then Sabrina drove the issue home. She pointed out that the same government often says there is not enough money for healthcare, childcare, or other programs many families depend on. Yet somehow billions were available here. In her view, that is why so many Americans see this as a question of priorities, and it is a concern that continues to resonate far beyond that panel discussion. If you're enjoying the video so far, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, and share. It really helps the channel grow and keeps these conversations going.
Exactly what it is. And by the way, I'm an expert on it, so if people want to argue with me, I am ready to rock. The other issue that you have with this when you're talking about this type of self-dealing is that to say in perpetuity that you can't go after somebody for criminal, does that mean they're criming? And this is a guy who's already, he's been adjudicated on 34 felonies. This is a guy who's been adjudicated for sexual abuse. We were talking about all the states. It seems like it's getting worse and worse and worse. And it's like he's burning the crops after he's stealing the corn because he's a lame duck president. Everything he's doing right now is about self-dealing. Right? You're looking at the Trump boys. They're sitting there getting contracts on drone warfare. You see all that happening right now. You see, Kushner in the Middle East. All this is self-dealing. You see sexual abuse. We were talking about all the states. It seems like it's getting worse and worse and worse. And it's like he's burning the crops after he's stealing the corn because he's a lame duck president. Everything he's doing right now is about self-dealing. Right? You're looking at the Trump boys. They're sitting there getting contracts on drone warfare. You see all that happening right now. You see, Kushner in the Middle East. All this is self-dealing. You see the stock trades. All this is him trying to enrich himself and his family as fast as he can. It's the most disgusting thing that I've seen, especially with somebody who's took the oath as a military member and as a congressman. And right now, when we're looking at this as sort of overarching, I can't imagine, right? I can't imagine anybody, and I'm not trying to stage this argument, I can't imagine anybody saying that this is right. It's so egregiously awful and corrupt. I don't know why right now there's not people, Republicans and Democrats, saying there's no way this type of self-dealing can happen.
Scott's about to tell you that it's right. Go ahead, Scott.
Is it wrong or is it right?
Well, first of all, why did he sue the IRS?
Because there was a leak.
Because they leaked his tax returns illegally. And
No, the IRS didn't leak.
Let's
be clear, the IRS didn't leak. An independent contractor did. So therefore, it doesn't apply.
It's a nice hair splitting, but
it's frivolous.
He himself,
While Trump was president. This happened during Trump's administration.
Yes. Facts matter.
He himself was the victim of the federal government being weaponized against him for political purposes. That's number one. Number two, I believe this deal on the looking back, it doesn't apply forward looking. It has to do with this period of time.
Now.
Number three, on the fund, we talked about this a little bit last night. I think that, the idea that someone who attacked a police officer, they should not get money. That's not right. However, if someone does have a legitimate claim that they were over-prosecuted or targeted unfairly or was on the periphery of some issue and had no reason to be targeted, and they have a legitimate claim against the government, I have no problem with that. I think the government makes mistakes all the time, and people should be able to
well, if we were talking about legitimate claims,
go back against their government over there.
It would be transparent. It wouldn't be hidden, right, and secretive. That's the same thing that they do all the time. They hide behind this executive privilege on non-appropriated funds. When you have something secret, it's not about transparency. Everything we've talked about is transparency. And my question, Scott, is do you actually believe he should sue the IRS for $10 billion on an independent contractor leak?
Do I think that people should
American
have their tax returns leaked by the federal government for political reasons, weaponized against them? I think he had every right to seek a grievance against the federal government for what they did to him on that. And it wasn't just him, it was other people too.
Well, Ken Griffin, it was Ken Griffin also, and Ken Griffin just asked for an apology because he knows it's egregiously ridiculous.
Well, and Trump got an apology, and he's not getting any money out of it.
Okay.
Forever.
It was 2 years. It was
well,
2 years.
But it's 1.776 billion.
And 2 years after the statute of limitations on this, it was not the federal government who did this. It was an individual contractor. The Supreme Court has ruled
just
3 times.
On his own.
The Supreme Court has ruled 3 times in precedent since 1911 that you cannot be the judge of yourself on anything. And so Donald Trump is sued himself to get a fund now settled with himself, to get a fund where he's going to write a check for himself. We all know that this is bullshit.
You agree with the leak?
This is a MAGA victimization fund that is sanctioned by Donald Trump. How dare he? How dare he? You look in the face and you justify this to the families of the police officers who were beaten, who were almost killed, to the people who were killed, to the people whose careers are ruined. I don't know about you, Scott, but I've spent time with those officers and their families, and their lives have been ruined. And unlike you, tonight you're saying this, but Todd Blanche could not say that today during his Senate hearing. Neither could J.D. Vance say and guarantee to the American people that any of those violent bastards who did that to those people who tried to overthrow our election on January 6th would not get a dime from this. American tax dollars should not go to this. This is dishonorable, it's grotesque, and anyone who tries to hide behind some kind of patriotism behind this should be ashamed of themselves. Look in the eyes of the families of the people who suffered on January 6th. You know who the victim is here? Them and our democracy. And shame on anyone who tries to justify this. And it's our dollars that they're robbing to do this. It's grotesque and despicable.
And it's also unconstitutional.
Absolutely. And I'm glad to see Jamie Raskin and the Democrats are going to challenge it.
This is where the entire debate came full circle, because Peter raised a point every American should pay attention to. He noted that the Supreme Court has repeatedly upheld the principle that no one can act as judge in their own case. That's more than a century of legal precedent. Yet critics argue that what we're seeing here appears to challenge that very principle. This is not some minor legal detail. The idea goes back to English common law and is known as nemo judex in causa sua. No person should sit in judgment of their own case. It is one of the oldest safeguards in the legal system, designed to prevent conflicts of interest and abuses of power. The founders understood the dangers of unchecked authority, which is why they built protections into the system from the start. Peter then shifted the focus to the human impact of the controversy. He questioned how anyone could justify asking taxpayers to fund compensation while families of law enforcement officers who suffered injuries and trauma are still seeking answers. He argued that the public deserves clear assurances about where the money is going and who will ultimately benefit from it. Another major concern raised during the discussion was whether constitutional limits are being respected. Critics point to Congress's authority over federal spending and argue that major financial decisions should go through the legislative process rather than being handled through executive action alone. That is why many lawmakers are calling for greater transparency and oversight. Regardless of where you stand politically, questions about accountability, constitutional authority, and public trust are issues that affect everyone. What do you think about this debate? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.